Terry Keeley. He is a senior managing principal at Sovereign Trends. Terry, you were just speaking with us earlier, a little bit with Erik as well, on what is going on with the U.S. debt situation. You are in touch with people on both sides of the aisle. What's the solution? When are we going to see it?
Well, Erik, Tim Geithner promised that we'd see a solution for both the debt crisis and for the long-term fiscal situation by the end of the summer. Remember, guys, the end of the summer is September 20th, not August the 2nd. We may very well blast through the August 2nd date the same way we did with the continuing resolution. Importantly, Deirdre, tomorrow marks the 5th of Vice President Joe Biden's talks. The topics tomorrow are going to be about taxes, a very sensitive topic. Make no mistake about it. Ultimately, this deal gets done between John Boehner and the president.
The debt ceiling deal.
Debt ceiling deal, how we get through this particular morass. And it's going to have to involve real cuts, Erik, and probably a pay-go, or what we now call a safe-go rule, like the Graham-Rudman rule. Otherwise, no deal.
Just out of curiosity, Republican presidential candidate Tim Pawlenty yesterday offering this tax reduction simplification plan.
Yeah.
What do you make of that? Is that going to shape the debate at all?
I think we talked about this in the earlier segment, right, Erik, how we need to combine growth with austerity. And that was clearly the hope of the path to prosperity. And the Simpson-Bowl plan, Deirdre, as you remember, the Simpson-Bowl plan also looks to cut the rates and eliminate all the tax expenditures. That's what the vice president will be talking about tomorrow.
Terry, you have spent your entire career, or most of it, talking to central bankers, economic policymakers, finance ministers. So you have seen many proposals for how to grow and examples of where all of these proposals go nowhere, like Japan. So tell us, really, your own opinion. Does anybody have a recipe for growth? Is growth even possible? The economy is in the middle of what some people would call a structural adjustment. Kyle Bass, the hedge fund manager, consults for some Republicans. He's in close contact with some of the same people you talk to.
Japan.
He told me yesterday, when we were talking about Japan, that the future for the United States is a bitter one. It is going to be very difficult for anybody, Republican or Democrat, to get the economy growing.
Erik, it's the multi-trillion-dollar question just asked, and obviously the one that Ken Rogoff and Carmen Reinhart proposed, and this time is different. Deleveraging processes are incredibly painful and slow. Is there any way out of it? Probably not. I think that if we can manage 2%, 3%, 4% growth, not Tim Pawlenty's 5% growth, Deirdre, we'd be doing terrific. As you know, the UK was cited by Moody's overnight as potential for a negative outlook, not a downgrade, if they do not achieve their growth targets. It's not clear that austerity and growth go together, even though they must ultimately.
But so you mentioned the UK. What is different about the U.S. system that could make somebody a little bit more optimistic that a solution can actually be found?
Well, the big difference between the U.S. and the UK is that the UK has already started their austerity program. We haven't even gotten to our spinach
We're still
yet.
fighting
We're still
about
eating
it.
dessert, and we haven't gotten to spinach. The reality is that the UK is not as robust, not as flexible. We have a much more diversified economy than the UK. We're less tethered to Europe than the UK is. So there are always reasons to be optimistic about America. Always reasons to think that we can find our own way. But we will not be able to do it if we do not get this debt and deficit under control.
And politically, as far as the political structure goes, is it possible to just stop the grandstanding and stop just the noise making and actually work?
You know, Deirdre, I spent some time, as you know, with senior Republican policymakers. They are so pessimistic about getting the changes they need to get through on the regulatory side and on the tax side with Barack Obama in the White House.
But how do they know, Terry, honestly, what's needed? These people aren't economists. They haven't run economies before. To go back to what Deirdre was saying and what we were talking to Fred Malek about before, this is a very political argument. Nobody has the magic bullet. How do they know what's necessary? You
saw the Jamie Dimon-Ben Bernanke fight yesterday, right? And basically, Jamie Dimon saying these regulations are not helping. We need regulations, but too much, the economy is stifled. I think
only so far as Jamie Dimon wants to meet a certain return on equity target. If he wants to do some lending and compromise some of his ROE, he could easily do that just like every other bank on Wall Street.
He finished his remarks on jobs, as you know. So he circled back around. I'm sure he wants to get to jobs through the profitability cycle. Importantly, and back to your question, I think, Erik and Deirdre, the United States has some tremendous advantages, but they will not come to fore without major changes in our fiscal patterns.
To Erik's point, does corporate America actually have to play a role?
Well, I don't think corporate America needs to be cajoled and bullied into hiring people that they're just going to fire 6 months later. What they need to know is that there's a very clear outlook for the taxes they pay, for the way they repatriate their profits, and ultimately for the health care.
Or not necessarily hiring people that they don't need, but, for example, taking a smaller spread on a loan.
For example, Deirdre, but that's not exactly how it works, as you very well know. I think one of the big issues raised by Obamacare is that many people are looking at increased healthcare costs, and they're just saying, we will no longer provide those internally. We will outsource our healthcare. That's a big uncertainty when you're trying to decide how you're going to grow your business, who you're going to hire, which markets you're going to invest in.
Speaking of healthcare, when Fred was on earlier, Terry, you were saying that healthcare may be the key to the message from the Democratic Party. The more they can hit on health care, the more, as Fred said, they can create a meta scare, the better a counter, perhaps, they have to the Republican message on taxes. You believe that that's gaining momentum?
There's no question in the polls in New York 26 showed that, Eric. The Republicans hope by framing this as a 55 years and under debate, they could address it to the next generation. It doesn't seem to be working. Old people and young people alike want some version of guaranteed health care.
So what do they do? What are the people you talk to in the Republican Party say they are going to do to address that particular challenge on Medicare?
The people I speak to want to take the next step. Okay, they want to get through this debt ceiling. They want to address the long-term fiscal challenges. They want to address tax reform. They're willing to do each one of those in sequence. You don't need them all at once. In many ways, the Ryan plan perhaps was too ambitious in trying to get everything done, but at least it's a plan. Have you seen any other plan? Has there ever been another plan as ambitious?
Well, Simpson-Bowles is pretty ambitious.
Simpson-Bowles, but not passed by one house of Congress, as we know. The Senate hasn't passed a budget for 762 days and counting. I'm sure they're still got that clock going.
Terry, thanks so much for the time.